Hi, and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Mitch Simpkins, and this is Wins for Widows, where you get practical guidance from the mouth of professionals who are united, all of us, in helping you get your feet back on the ground, experiencing the loss of a loved one. Together, we'll uncover the rooted question that you might be asking yourself: what now? And what do I do next? Today, I am really excited to introduce you and to host Kathi. Kathi Balasek is the founder of Grief Ready Communication. Her work is specifically focused on financial advisors, firms, and leaders. However, it's applicable to really anybody who is helping others through grief, specifically around communication skills and needing to support through loss and transition, those life-altering moments, to strengthen trust, retention for financial advisors, and really for all of us in any circumstance, the long-term relationships that we want and we want to keep so important in our lives. She's had 25 years as a university professor and educator, and specializes in turning these complex experiences really into practical, teachable frameworks. And she's going to tell us a little about her own personal experience as I always do. We talk before, right? And I ask you questions and get to know you, and you come very well equipped and ready to talk. So Kathi, can you tell us a little about your background? And welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Mitch. It's an honor and privilege to be here. And first, I love the name, Wins for Widows. I mean, we need some wins to get back in this game of life.
Amen to that.
So I love the name.
Thank you.
So my background, I'm a small town kid, grew up in Montana and married a fabulous man. And I live in California now, and my background is in education. Grew up, my dad was a basketball coach. Just grew up in a very normal, happy home, and all my dreams, they were on their way. And life took a very sad turn for me personally. And my husband was diagnosed with brain cancer, and I went from, soccer mom wife to caregiver to widow in my 30s.
Wow.
And, faced with the reality of raising 5 children.
Yeah, that's huge.
And so what I've learned along the way and who helped me, I mean, there's a whole community of people who helped me get back on my feet, community, family, friends. It's a big piece of who I am. And grief shapes you. It changes you. And it took me a long, long time to put steps in front of me. And so that's sort of why I'm here. I've always loved teaching. I raised kids. They're out of the nest. They're happy, healthy contributors of society. And what more can I be happy about that? I was meant to be a mom, and I was meant to help others. And that's the way I was raised.
Well, and your communication style in our early conversations is very clear. So I can only imagine how clear and how much good you're doing. So I assume as a result of that, your education, your passion then said, how do I help other people help? Did you have any specific, I didn't ask this before. Did you have any experiences early, Kathi, that people would say stuff to you, meaning well to you, I'm sorry for your grief, or whatever other language we use, right? That you heard and you're like, I get where you're coming, but that just wasn't, that's not the way to say that. Anything right off the top of your head that comes to mind?
Yes, I think early on, I mean, I knew at some point in my life that I wanted my experience to change something. I wanted to do something with my experience, but that didn't happen till, 15 years later. But initially, you start to be very aware of who shows up and who doesn't, and who, avoids you.
Yeah.
Because let's just face it. I mean, it's like party of one. It's the lost sock of the world. I make people uncomfortable. My story makes people uncomfortable because they go
They don't know what to
immediately,
say.
well, what if that happened to me? Or what if that happened to my children and so that's a normal human response to avoid. And, you see somebody really hurting. And so you don't want to make it worse, right? And so we have that fear of not saying anything, but people would say some things that would really bother me right off the bat were, your kids don't want to see you so sad. You're young, you'll find somebody new. That whole
Mhm.
kind of dismisses, your right to grieve. The term is disenfranchising somebody's loss. And when we don't acknowledge their loss as significant, we say things to try to fix them, to try to have it go away, because that's logically how a human would feel. They don't want them to be in pain. People genuinely want to help you and support you.
Yeah.
But yet, grief is such a universal experience, but it's not a universal language. We have never been taught the language of loss.
Yeah.
And so it's awkward. We don't, who loves to appear awkward, right?
Right. Right. For
And,
sure.
and so we go to the main two sayings, I'm sorry, or
Mm.
so sorry for your loss,
Mhm. Mhm.
which that's a starter, but wow, we could say so much more. And some of the things that you think are helpful really are hurtful
Mm,
of,
mm,
saying things like anything that begins with at least is a problem.
mm.
At least they lived
Minimizing.
a long life, or at
Yeah.
least they didn't have to suffer, or
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great advice. Great
and then a
advice.
lot of the things that say, well, it's in God's plan, or he's with the angels now, and, time heals. Well, something really specific of anybody who grieves will say this, that whether they had a strong faith, somewhat faith, or no faith, that in a time of deep grief and loss, people question their faith.
Mm.
And I think I spent a decade mad at God. And that's normal. And then people who grieve feel guilty for feeling that way. But it's completely normal to question, why do these things happen? So those types of statements are not helpful.
So what is? What do you
I,
say?
I'm glad you asked. There's sort of a format that you should always follow. First thing is, should always acknowledge their loss, and you can begin it with, I'm sorry. I am so sorry for the loss of your husband, John. Say
Mm.
their name.
Good. Love that. Yeah.
Always say their name.
Yeah.
Acknowledge that something that you knew about this person, their life, tell me what a wonderful person or humor or,
I remember how
friend,
funny he was, or he was
right?
such a good friend to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Give
Love
me
that.
a story that you
Cool.
remember, or the impact that he made on you or the world or whomever. And if you didn't know the person, if somebody says, oh, well, my aunt passed away over the weekend,
Mm.
we immediately go into, were you close? How old were they? How'd they die? Right? Like, why do we have to quantify my right to grieve?
Mm. Mm.
And those are statements that
Wow.
I don't think
That's
are
cool.
purposeful.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
almost reflexive,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what we do with everything else in life, right? We
Exactly.
quantify it. We want to put it in a box. We want to understand it. So we want, and sometimes, unfortunately, we want to compare ourselves with it, right?
Ex-
That's what's happening.
exactly.
Like, is this going to happen to me?
Right.
Okay.
It's
Love that.
one of the key things that I work with professionals that deal with grieving clients or grieving employees is it is so hard to maintain presence in this conversation because our mind immediately goes
Hmm.
to our own life, our own losses,
Interesting.
comparing. It's really, you've got to have
It is.
such a continued strategic practice to
Yeah.
stay present.
Like a poster on your computer. Don't do this
Yes, it ain't about you.
because it is always. So asking questions and saying, tell me a story.
Yes, tell me a story. And you might begin with asking permission. Like, I would love to hear about Jane or John or whoever you lost. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear about Carol. But is that okay?
Good.
Are
Love
you
that.
ready, or is this
Love
another
that.
time?
Good. Good. Good.
And if
So
it's a
cool.
brand new person that you don't know well, a brand new client or a brand new person that you met, ask them, just say, I would love to hear about their life.
Mm, mm,
Because when people say, you meet somebody for the very first time and they say, well, you say, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, or where'd you grow up and all of this. And you just say, well, I grew up in Montana, and, unfortunately my dad passed away. And so they wouldn't say that if they didn't want you to ask about
mm.
it. We don't mention things that we don't want to talk about. I call them divine invitations.
Cool. Very cool. To a very sacred space.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
When that happens, rather than saying an immediate "I'm sorry," you say, "Thank you for sharing that with me. I really appreciate that. I don't know you well, but I'd love to get to know you and tell me about your dad if you
Mm,
want to." You know, these things happen every day in life, whether it's, I'm worried about retirement, I don't know about that, or gosh, my kids are all graduated and the house feels so lonely.
mhm. Mhm.
We immediately go into, but look at all the free time you can
Mm,
have and look at how
mm,
proud you
mm,
are of your children.
mm, mm, mm,
Brene Brown, who I love her literature, her books, I just love her vibe. She says something that I always go back to. When somebody is hurting, you got to meet them in the mud.
mm,
Meet them where they are.
love that. Yeah, I love
Link
that.
arms with
Yeah.
them. And
Jump in the mud with them.
yes,
Listen and let them set. I think, well, and there's a lot about let them, right? Let people be the way that they're
absolutely.
gonna be. We don't have to change it. We just but we can be empathetic, show compassion. And as you're really so well indicating, the communication that we use and the words that we do is the way that we do that. And it's a fine balance. So tell me, Kathy, if you're the widow, because I have a lot of widows watching this. How do they encourage others, or what do they say to help others learn to shape the conversation appropriately in a way that is appropriate? What advice do you have there for them?
My first part of I tread lightly in giving advice to widows, even though I'm their sister. Okay. Widowhood, my advice to widows would be to really take your time and space and pace and grieve, because there is a ton of research that is out there that a lot of the things that are happening to you physically, cognitively, brain fog, confusion, self-doubt, uncertainty, safety, all of these things are creating a complete weather pattern of you to protect yourself. And I personally don't think it's a griever's job to teach others at that stage of the game.
Okay.
I think it's other people's jobs, professionals and people, maybe to ask. Say, ask questions like, what would be one thing today that I could help with?
Mm,
Where in your home could I be of assistance? When is the best time for me to contact you? Do you prefer me to text you? Is it once a week? Do you prefer me to stop by? And we're asking
mm,
how they like to be supported.
good. Yeah.
What professionals can really do who are trained in working with grieving clients and have the language and have that background, they can really have those conversations and give this griever space
Mm,
to do what they need to get done.
yeah.
You can free up some of the things because you understand what
Mm,
they're going through.
mm, mm,
A piece of what I do teach is understanding loss,
yeah.
and that first and second year, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this, Mitch, that first year is just like a blur. I
Yeah.
mean,
I've
coming,
seen it.
going, whatever.
I've seen it. I've watched it. I've
Yes, you've seen it.
talk about brain fog. Yeah, it's real.
Yes.
It's real, as well as motivation, and this is sometimes the last thing they wanna do, the last thing they wanna deal with is their finances, and so
Ex
it really is a tap dance. Kathy, as you're talking, a lady I'm just talking with now she's not widowed yet, but her husband has Parkinson's and is now unable to speak, and she's in a position now, she knows nothing about the finances. Like 0. But she's the caregiver of him, and kinda to your point of what you're saying about advisors having to accommodate for her, I have to ask, what is the way that you can communicate? "Well, my husband, when he hears me doing this, gets really anxious." "Well, can I send someone to your home to help you?" "No way, because he would flip out. Not good." So, can you talk very long or does it need to be short? Needs to be texting, and then I can pull myself away outside to talk while he's not listening because
Mm,
it makes him anxious. So, to your point, a lot of those questions helps me say, all right, how am I going to help her in the space that she's in the way that meets her where she's at? Because the typical way, if I was in Florida, I'd go to her house, right? Doesn't
right.
work. And so finding those different ways to connect are important, and it comes with listening, asking questions, and understanding them in their space and where they're at.
Yeah. Exactly. Because, when people, I mean, she's experiencing loss. It's called anticipatory loss. She's anticipating and already grieving the loss of her husband. And, when somebody gets a cancer diagnosis or some, we're already starting the grieving process.
Mm,
I always say to people that I lost John twice, first at diagnosis and the second at death,
mm,
because things were completely different right after that diagnosis. It was never the same.
mm,
And so
mm.
you are grieving. It's a different lifestyle now. Your schedule's different. It's filled with doctor's appointments, prescription refilling, all of this juggling.
Interesting.
And then you're wondering, why am I so exhausted and sad all the time?
Okay.
Because you're anticipating something that hasn't happened yet, and
Okay.
it is
Okay.
loss.
So it's loss of maybe the typical lifestyle that you have,
Yes.
and those are losses with similar grief needs to be fed,
Yes.
and then you're kinda grieving your spouse along the way, and then definitely upon the passing. That's really insightful, Kathy.
Yeah.
That's really
Well,
insightful.
and I think this is why I call what I teach grief literacy, because there are pieces of grief that you have to understand to be able to communicate. Because typically, in those scenarios where it's been diagnosis area, but not death, most people go into, he's going to beat it. He'll get through this. And this whole, we are culturally conditioned to cheer people up. In those scenarios, the person who you described who is caregiving for her husband, she's lost. She's frightened. She's
Mm,
overwhelmed.
mm, mm.
No
Yeah,
amount of cheering
yeah,
is really supportive and a way to think about communication overall in these scenarios. What is going to connect and what is disconnecting? And if I try to cheer and fix, I'm disconnecting.
mm,
If I try to listen, learn, keep her talking, ask more, clarify,
mm,
I'm learning and we're connecting. It takes strategic thinking. And that's why advisors such as yourself, my hat is off to you. We need people like you because it is such, your job in this scenario is such a tall, cognitive, and emotional lift.
yeah, it's very
And
big.
compassion fatigue is a real phenomenon.
Mm,
You can only give so much.
mm, mm,
But what you're doing, I believe, is the highest form of leadership because people remember who shows up in the worst of times more than they remember who shows up in the best of times.
yeah, yeah. No, and I love what you're saying to me personally, having been married 30 years, it's probably about now that when I've tried to fix my wife or my family's problems, that I've learned, shut up, stop. They
Mm,
they won they one didn't ask for it. They didn't ask for your advice. They simply were telling you, and I definitely have learned that just listening and letting it go, letting it happen, listening to it. One thing it's interesting to me too is it's often a very different my initial perception of something as I drill in and ask additional questions. Well, tell me more about that. I don't understand that. Give me more information. 9 times out of 10, my initial perception is very different than what I really find is underneath it. And I wouldn't have known it unless I started asking questions and, to your point, not tried to jump in and kill the conversation by being so smart to give the advice that they're just gonna love, and only to find out later that they're like, I didn't really even ask for that. Why did you do that?" So, very important.
think that I think most people do that
Yeah,
because we want to help.
yeah,
At the core, we want to ease others' burdens, right? But yes, in these scenarios of just listening and not fixing and them feeling heard and supported and learning more is really where the connection is, you
Very
know.
cool. Very cool.
Typically, I mean, I'm like your worst nightmare on an airplane because we're gonna talk.
You're
Don't
one
even
of
put
those
your headphones on.
when you turn your, headphones and close your eyes, you're like,
Yes,
"Oh, no, Kathy, she's a
because
communicator."
we are wired to connect, and you can get anybody to talk about their favorite subject, which is themselves. If you know how to ask, how to connect, how to pull some things out that matter.
Yeah, yeah.
And pretty soon you start that, and then they don't want to stop talking.
And then you're like, "Hold it, I'm putting my headphones on. You've gone way too far here."
But that really is how you should approach people in your life, that they truly want connection.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if they say certain things that are pivotal in their life, difficult pivotal, like loss, death, change, they want you to ask about it.
Mm,
They're
mm,
they're teeing you up,
mm,
okay? Take your shot,
mm.
but take a really good shot,
And
Thank
realize
them.
in that ask, it's a sacred space that they've allowed you to be in.
Hmm?
You have to tread lightly, and you have to be very careful when you're in there, because
Exactly.
it's a tender spot. Even though the intro has been made, it's still a very tender spot.
It's
That's
very
the
tender.
challenge of it, isn't it? That's
Yes.
the challenge of it.
You're not doing a cannonball off the high dive. I mean, this is slow and you're really listening.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll just say, you know what, I'm just overwhelmed with everything. Well, you might not be able to relate with the death or loss that they told you. And just simply identifying, that's a little exercise I do, is I give a scenario and I try to make professionals pull out the emotion.
Mm,
And so if they pulled out overwhelm, just saying something like, it sounds like a lot is on your plate and it's overwhelming. All you have to do is say that, and then they start talking
and
more
then they're ready to
and
go.
telling you
Yeah,
more.
yeah.
Goal is to invite the story, connect to the emotion, and keep the story going.
Love it. Love
You'll
it.
learn more. You'll learn more what matters. You make the conversations more meaningful, deeper, quicker
Mm,
if you
mm.
can truly connect in that emotion.
That's awesome. Kathy, can I ask? I know we're almost out of time, but I got to ask you this. We've talked a little about grief literacy. Give me a couple of things for widows who have recently lost their partners and for those who may soon lose. What do they need to learn and understand just in terms of grief? I know that could be like a 3-hour conversation, Kathy, but you've been there, you teach it, you understand it. You mentioned that it's so critical that we understand it. What is it for professionals and for those who are in it that is so important to understand about that grief?
First of all, that your grief is unique as your thumbprint. You are allowed to grieve any way you want. Know that. There's a lot of things that say that there's stages of grief and there's phases of grief. Grief is all over the place, and you are allowed to grieve any way you want without justification, explanation, any type of excuses. You are allowed to set boundaries of, I appreciate you asking, but I'm not ready to talk about that right now. My heart goes out to your listeners because grief lasts forever. It does, but it changes and you learn to walk along with it. And as you grow, things grow around it,
Mm,
but you never get out of it.
mm, mm,
Because it's not that he was my husband. He is my husband. He'll always be my husband. And if you've lost somebody, they'll always be your dad, right? They'll always be your son.
mm, mm,
It's an is.
mm,
And to keep that memory alive and surround yourself with people who welcome that story, even if it's sad, is a gift. And I'll tell you a quick story of my son got married this summer, and he's an airline pilot, just like his dad. But at the wedding, we were with a group at a table, and people started sharing their wedding and engagement stories, how they got engaged. And then I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to make everybody uncomfortable. So maybe this would be a good time for me to excuse myself, right? I'm like, check, please. Okay. Because I don't want to ruin the mood.
Already. Yeah.
But you know what? Somebody paused and said, Kathy, I really want to know how you met John. Tell
So
us that
cool.
story.
So
You
cool.
can't imagine how much I felt included. And when people have experienced loss, specifically widows that was their whole life, or their dad, their whole life, their parents, whatever it was, invite their story.
Hmm.
Because just because somebody lost their spouse, like many of your clients are widows. They lost their spouse. Do they lose the right to tell their stories to others? And that's really, I think, community, love, care, standing, trust, loyalty. I think that's where um, life grows
So
and
awesome.
healing happens.
So awesome. Kathy, I have talked to a lot of people about grief literacy. Your last comment is one of the coolest things I've heard. Very
Thank
cool.
you.
Very
Thank you.
cool, very succinct, tells to me, explains what I tried to say. You just did it so much better. I'm gonna quote
Thank
you.
you.
Can I steal that quote from you?
You can steal, we are DJs. We put our own spin on other people's stuff all day, right?
No, that's incredible. I love that. I love living with it and allowing other things to grow around it with you while you carry it with you because it never goes away. Love that concept. Love that idea. Love everything you've talked about today, Kathy. You are amazing. Such a gift to everyone who's going to watch this, and your work is making a difference. So kudos to you. Thank you for being so open and sharing, and for having the courage to take a very difficult circumstance and have to relive it perhaps every day as you work, but make something good of it. That takes a lot of courage. A lot
Thank
of
you.
courage.
Thank
So
thank you for the kind words, man. Thank
you're
you
awesome.
for interviewing me. But it's an honor and a privilege. We are here but a breath. And so let's get out and make somebody's life better.
You're awesome. Thank you, Kathy. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.